Porque isso é uma vez. E assim já deve dar para ouvir. Uma vez eles.
Hi, Lena, can you hear me?
Hi, hey, yes, I can hear you.
Oh, nice. Hello, I'm Nuno. I'm the one who spoke to you
Nice
with
to meet
emails.
you.
Yeah, nice to meet you as well. Thank you for coming. So we are just waiting for the people to come. It will still take a little while, but not that much.
Yes. Should we quickly test?
Yeah, we can test.
Da-da-da.
I think it is working.
You're seeing a great presentation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Nice.
All right, so it starts in 5 minutes and then the presentation at in 10 minutes after that. So 5:10 or 6:10 for you, I
Perfectly.
think.
I will pass the mic to my friend, Professor.
Hi, Lena. Thank you for being here. Yes, the idea is to start at 4, so I'll first say a few words, me and maybe Ricardo as well, and then we will have probably someone from the department also saying a few words, and then I'll pass on the floor to you if that's okay.
Yes, sounds great.
Okay.
All right, then I'll be back in 5.
Yes, please.
See you in a bit.
Toda a gente aqui sabe falar inglês, certo? Assumo. Okay. So I'll be speaking in English. First of all, thank you for being here. This is the 4th edition of Processing Community Day, and this year it happens also integrated in the program of Ciclo de Conversas, Design and Multimedia. Okay, so this is the first session for both events. Ciclo Conversas will have 4 sessions, and PCD will have another one on the 11th. I can already say that after this session we will have an inauguration downstairs near Feed and Play, so I invite everyone to go there. And then next week on Wednesday we will have a session of PCD in Centro Cultural Peneda Saudade, where we will have another keynote speaker, we have short talks, and we will have the main exhibition happening there. So we invite you all to be there. But before starting with the event, I would like to thank a couple of people. So first, I would like to thank the department here represented by Professor Tiago Martins, and also the Department of Architecture. They're represented by Professor Ana Boavida. But I would also like to thank the team that allowed this to happen. So here, Nuno, Carolina, and everyone else, Olga, Ricardo, Jessica. So this was the team that made it possible for today. And before proceeding to Lena, I would like to give the floor to Professor Tiago, who may say a few words, because the department has been great to us. He has allowed for award for the opening call. It has allowed us to use the space for the exhibition, and also to have these presentations. And so, Tiago.
Okay, good afternoon. On behalf of the Department of Informatics Engineering, I want to welcome you all here. Nice to see you all. Okay. I will not say much, but it's great to have these kind of events here, of course. And it's also a pleasure for the department to support this kind of events. Okay. As you may know, processing and all these intersections of domains has a long history here. So it's always good to have these kind of events in the spaces of the department. Okay. And I want to or I wish you a very interesting processing community day, and also Ciclo de Conversas Design and Multimedia. Okay. And I will now close my mouth and move the mic to Nuno.
Hello, everyone. First of all, want to thank everyone from the team who made this event possible. I also want to thank Lena for coming for the keynote. We are very, very glad for having you here. And I also want to share a few words about Lena, especially from her biography. Lena is a graphic designer working between design and code. She will focus on the research and the development of design tools and typographic systems. And she's most interested in the intersection of art, typography, technology, and philosophic theory, and how they inspire visual communication. I would like to pass the mic to Lena and want everyone to have a good keynote.
Hi, can you hear me? I assume that's a yes.
We can hear you.
Thank you
start
so
sharing the
much for
screen.
having me and for this introduction. I'm Lena, and as Nuno introduced, I'm a graphic designer. And today I'd like to share with you how I work a bit, what I work on right now, and most
Lena?
importantly,
Sorry,
Yes?
you'll need to reshare the screen. I'm not sure
Oh.
if you were already counting on that, but
yes.
okay, now it's
Is it
perfect.
here right now?
Perfect.
Okay, nice. So yeah, how I work in general and what the intersection of graphic design, typography, and code means to me. So I studied at Bauhaus University. Most of the courses I took there were very, focused on experimental typography and type design. And this is also in a course focused on this topic, I was first introduced to coding with processing. And yeah, with these theses that I was able to do during my studies, both my master's and my bachelor's was completed at Bauhaus. I was able to dive a bit more into aesthetic theory, and I was able to kind of write about why I'm so attracted to working with code and why I see code not only as a skill, and in my case, even more so as kind of a means to inspire visual communication. So, a few projects that I brought with me as examples, they range from different media types. This, for example, is an article I designed for Wired magazine. These pixel permutations were achieved with code. So code for me can be a helping tool to create an aesthetic from pre-existing images like photos. This is from last year. It's a small web project designed for an exhibition. Code, so this physics engine inspired the whole identity. So all of the printed matter was also kind of, inspired by code. But when the effect truly shined was on the website. This is another website I did for an oil painter where you can, kind of view these images in a more intimate matter through the screen. This was inspired by the copy function in processing that some of you might know. Another web project I did at the end of the last year, I might need to click. Does the video start now? Yes. It's for a type designer, and this was about showcasing all of her typefaces. You can see a similar effect that was achieved through coding. And it was important to me to kind of read all the data from these typefaces. So we might also see more obscure glyphs that might not be used as often. And these strings that you saw in the beginning are randomly generated every time you reload the website, just to, have a bit of fun with it as well. This project is one of my earlier client projects. I was able to do it together with Tim Rotenbröker. Some of you might know him, a big name in the processing community as well. And it was for a company that produce synthesizers, and we were able to work on this promotional video for one of their projects with a coded system that emphasizes a grid aesthetic and an automated workflow that was especially created for this video, but focuses on human interaction. So all of these videos are actually clicked pixel by either me or Tim, which changes for me and for him as well, this coded aesthetic from something purely automated to something that can contain a lot of mistakes and happy little accidents, as one says. I like to call this way of working creating kind of a meditative machine. So similar to the process of drawing something on paper, the question for me sometimes is, how can I achieve this in the digital world with code, where things might work differently and it's not as easy to create this human touch that is nice to have in design. Here are some examples and stills what this tool that was made in processing can output. We have the processing interface and then obviously this interactive canvas where then you would be able to click. Some of these outputs, they were not used for the video. were shown in an exhibition that me and Tim were part of. And these are some of the more obscure examples where we try to really push the system to its limits and see how many different styles we can get out of this very simple idea. So what all of these projects have in common is a fascination with components. This fascination has been with me for a very long time. The first time I worked with kind of a component-based system that I still use today is an experimental type course I did in 2018. And I created these modular shapes that were meant to generate forms based on a simple square grid. But the goal was that the grid would not be as easily visible. So the goal was that the shapes look way more complicated than they actually are, but everything is based on putting stuff very simply together on this square grid, very similar to how I find in coding that extremely simple components and the combination of simple stuff can make complex outcomes that don't look simple at all. So the interesting thing for me with this project was, sure, we have some modular shapes. They fit together on some ends they don't, depending how you rotate or mirror them. But loading this into a TTF file, so into a font file, changed something for me because instead of placing them freely on a canvas in a program, for example, like Adobe Illustrator, now with the TTF, I have an interface and how I interact with these shapes. And that there is this new barrier that gives me opportunities, but also takes away some opportunities. How these shapes can be put together was an interesting thing that I wanted to explore. These kind of shape archives of modular types clustered in different typefaces, in different styles, is something that I still work on and kind of expand this library. What I find interesting about these shapes is they were inspired purely from a digital design standpoint. So some of them are really pointy, or they have perfect Bezier curves that have no anchor points in between, like the one true and simple curve before the next corner of the next component comes. And also this putting them together seamlessly on a straight line is only really possible in the digital context anyway. So I find it super inspiring to then take projects in general, and this project was the first where I did that, from its context, the very digital context, and make an analog equivalent of it. So there are different rules and different kind of limiting factors that then shape the aesthetics of what you can do with it. So in this analog example, when you stack these shapes like a children's toy, for example, then some balance and gravity pull on these shapes, prohibiting certain constructions and allowing certain constructions that in the digital version is not really important. And that's something I find really important for every project, because this is how I can generate new ideas and find kind of new aspects and new directions to look for, and also new ways how I can maybe use it that I can think of in this process. So after some time, I realized it's nice to have the keyboard as an interface to type these shapes, but I want to create a machine. I want to have these nice shapes that look good and look closed always, so you don't necessarily see that they're based on a very simple grid. So this is when I first got into processing and wrote super simple scripts that would basically output 2x4, 9x9, whatever variables I put in of these shapes, and then I can curate and look for combinations that maybe are rotated or stretched that I would have not done by hand. So this processing tool then, of course, also had limitations again. And I realized I want to make this a bigger project, because when I first started to design these shapes, I thought this is already a tool in the widest sense. I mean, everything can be a tool if you kind of argue hard enough. But how can I really decide what constants and what variables I need in order to make this kind of an open artwork where not only me, but also other people can play with these components? And this is how Mono tool was born. It's a P5 JS based little online tool where now you can stretch the shapes and rotate the shapes quickly. So for me, it was the best of both worlds, between having this really rudimentary processing sketch where you just select the number of the matrix and then everything else is automated, and this vector-based workflow where you would place the shapes individually. So this tool tries to kind of combine both, where still the user is the main driver of composition in a way, but some things are also automated. There are gradients, they always end in black, so they can be nicely added onto these shapes, added in the tool. And yeah, I was surprised when me and other people played with this system that there are outcomes that I didn't really expect to happen within the system. So that's nice. You can still try it. It's on aspektedesrasters.de. I can share it in the chat later. It's yeah, it's a bit of a, it's quite some years ago. It's in German. It was the title of my thesis. So before I show you more of these more research-based or independent projects, I want to share the theory that I kind of worked on for my master thesis, that is about creative coding and aesthetics, and what kind of aesthetics creative coding can, or in my opinion, should produce. So since these are all like aesthetics, coding, data, process, creativity, we are dealing with a lot of kind of blurred words, and it's not really clear what that means. So the title of my theory was called Ambiguous Aesthetics, to kind of reflect that none of these terms have kind of really this sharp definition. Everybody kind of maybe understands something differently when they hear these terms. But what was important to me, and it's not meant to be a theory that is applicable to everybody's workflow, but what I wanted to find out for myself is kind of what determines this special aesthetic that I look for in my coded works. And I borrowed a bit of, yeah, art critics theory or research for this undertaking. And this is where also the term ambiguity comes from. So in modern art critique, ambiguity is an interplay of different aspects. So we look at a visual and different aspects pop up, and not one of these aspects is the true interpretation of the artwork, but more the ambiguity and the tension between all those different aspects is what makes it interesting. As an example, we have this monochrome blue painting by Yves Klein, and this can be interpreted as a showcase of the scientific progress that he made when he created or found this color. It can be a 3D room that we look into. It can be a metaphor for the sky. It can be just a 2D rectangle that we are seeing hung up on the wall, and it probably can be many, many different things. And not one of these interpretations is what makes this artwork intriguing, but more the tension and the ambiguity, the in-betweenness of what this can mean. So I tried to apply this to creatively coded visuals. And when I mean creatively coded, I mean an input that in some way can be transformed into an output. This, of course, being in this case with code. So I asked myself, where are the aesthetics even happening in this creative process of coding? Because it's not only writing the code and then having a visual, it starts before that. So a very rudimentary version of that is what I tried to sketch here. So with inspiration, idea, and imagination, we already, again, have this very loose kind of terms that are not really definable, and we don't really know what they mean or how they work. But what is for sure, that between having an idea and having like an image in your head or an idea, when these ideas transfer into something real that is on this world, we can see it, we can touch it, then there are some limiting factors. So an idea doesn't have a data type. Something changes to an idea before it actually comes into the real world. So kind of the change of the medium being idea in this case, there are some limiting factors that are applied to the aesthetics that something can have. And then there comes a second filter of limiting factors. This is kind of the tool that you would use to bring your idea into the world. So it can be digital, it can be analog, or whatever. So what are the limiting factors in something coded or something that is made with a computer? And I find this really fascinating. So in an analog context, let's say you take a balloon, you fill it with color, and you throw it onto a wall, and this is how you would create your design or your art piece. And there are a lot of limiting factors are determining what the aesthetic of this kind of tool or this process is maybe how liquid is the paint, how strong are you, how fast can you throw, even more detailed or obscure things like how humid is the room where you're doing this in. So I find it fascinating that you cannot replicate something like this in the analog world because the mass of data that is kind of conserved in this moment is just too big and too complicated to kind of comprehend or to document it. So in a theoretical world, I'm thinking this is possible to recreate it exactly if you have the same conditions, but in the real world, it's not because it's just too complex. And something really exciting is happening for me when we compare this logic or apply this logic to something digital. So once I have a script and I know exactly what goes into the script, what input goes in there, and what rules I have written, then it's predictable, and I will be able to produce the same output not only twice, but hundreds of times. Of course, we have some things that can change this, like randomness, but depending how you get that randomness, it might never be truly random, and you can also record the exact data of that randomness and then recreate it again with this data. So for creative coding and aesthetics, what does this mean? Let's say this is a creatively coded output. What kind of aspects can we see in this work? So to me and for my work, what I find is I see mainly two aspects. One is, of course, the code that is behind this. And then on the other hand, we interpret it as a means of visual communication, similar to the painting. So what do we see in it? What can it mean? What can it be a metaphor for? What kind of information that we want to convey to a viewer might be in here. So on the one hand, we have structured data, and it's nothing more than a data visualization of what the code is. And on the other hand, we have this kind of aspect as a means of visual communication, and we have design information that is in here. And to me, if these two aspects are in balance, this is when I kind of see an ambiguous aesthetic. And this is the aesthetic that I kind of chase in my work. So on the one hand, I think it needs to be clearly visible that this is structured and this comes from a recipe, an algorithm, a code, something rule-based. But then it also needs to have this quality that makes it a means of visual communications where maybe different people can see different aspects in it, but also the creator maybe have some designed visual information that is conveyed. And this is, of course, not something that I claim I achieve, but more a thing that I try to compare my output to. So is this to me an ambiguous aesthetic? Does it lean more on the one aspect or more on the other? How can I change it? So it's kind of a tool for me to test these projects and test these outputs. So I am very fascinated with stones, probably because to me, with the example I shared prior to this, a type of rock or a rock that you find on the ground is probably the closest thing to an analog kind of piece of data that you can find. It's not shaped, it's not purposely made, it's not created, but just the data that it received by nature kind of shaped its form. And this tool is working with an archive of photographs. It's the same tool that was made, the first project that I showed you for Wired magazine. It was made with a similar script to this. So I load all the pixel data, all the colors, and there are different kind of permutations and substitutions applied to create an array of different results depending on variables like grid size, how many colors are taken, how different these colors are, and then they are kind of remixed into new abstracted shapes of these photographs. Here, I loaded in the whole archive from a university that collected these rock samples, and then you would get a PDF with an overview of like possible results. Here are some more close-ups, what can be achieved with this tool. And where there's stills, of course, there is animation in theory. I never really work exclusively with code, even for an independent or research project. Code to me is, like I said, a tool to generate inspiration, to generate different aspects, and to kind of see where the journey takes me. But then in a second step, I like to work with these outputs, sometimes with my hands or yeah, in a digital context to rearrange them, to sort them, to kind of try to make different things with them as well. This is a typeface project that came out of this. It's not related to processing or to coding directly, but it came from this other project, or yeah, let's say after it. It's made in a software called Glyphs. And what I found interesting here is Glyphs obviously is made to create normal text typefaces, but also crazy display typefaces, but they have an anchor point limit per glyph of 20K. And this rock font, it's called Geo, pushes the data limit on this. So every glyph has around 20,000 anchor points. So the next project is a typeface project again that was made at the same time as this theory for yeah, creatively coded graphic design. And it's also about in-betweenness and the ambiguity of things. I find the gradient to be a nice representative of this concept. It's between A and B. It's very visual, but also very mathematical. So the special thing about this typeface is that normal typefaces consist of vector forms and they create a foreground and a background just by the nature of how they are made. This is a color typeface and it is readable nor in the foreground and neither in the background. So kind of the in-betweenness where the two color meets is where the letters kind of gain readability of form. So if we were to remove the gradients, the lines are just here so we can see anything. There would be just a black box left and we couldn't see anything. I was really fascinated that it's a grid of 11 and this is not a very fine grid. But depending on how far you are away from these letters, you can even depict the detailed glyphs like the 1/2 or fraction sign. And yeah, that it works even in this context. So I tried to make as many glyphs as possible. The idea with this system was to make it a variable typeface. So I created scripts to kind of shift these components in a way that they would destroy or encrypt readability. This is an example where the readable one is interpolated to a random one, but there were also other explorations where they would divide in an orderly manner and yeah, kind of different experiments, all yeah, rooted in basic math. This is how the typeface looked and what axis it could interpolate on when it was finished. It was quite a long journey until then, because when I actually created this project, I knew nothing about color fonts and I didn't even know that there were different formats for different use cases in color fonts or different features that they might have and might not have. And what I realized is that making a gradient variable so that it is able to stretch, which was crucial for this effect, was not a feature that any color font format had at the time. So you see it here at the bottom. I saw the preview in Glyphs and I thought, okay, great. This will export and then I'm done. But it turns out that the Color V1 format was only in development by Google at that time. So I had a very long break in my project where I tried to get to work, and I had the opportunity to also exchange with people on GitHub that were working on this format to kind of test and get this working and shipped to browsers. But in this time, yeah, I mean, I was happy that I knew something was coming, but on the other hand, I wanted to hand in my thesis and needed to show that this effect worked. So I took some detours and I coded the letters as little arrays. So this is a handmade data set where I described how each letter looks and how many grid points every gradient occupies. So I was able to animate it in this way without it having the color font format. And yeah, just like in the first project, so this modular shape project, I try to translate this into something analog. So here you can see some plexiglass component experiments that I made. Sorry, component is not the right word. I'm thinking of domino stone. I don't know if this is a non-German thing, but kind of these stones that you place next to each other. And yeah, to create forms with this and experiment with these shapes with your hands. And lastly, in the true spirit of working in a modular way, which is coding to me, obviously, as well, is rediscovering how you can reuse those scripts, those components, those things you make, and never making anything that is never used again. So you have your toolbox and you can always pull out and have this comfort that you're working in a sustainable way for yourself is something very non-code, but it looks like code maybe a little bit. How these letter forms were also used to create illustrations and yeah, fun little pictures with typographic interventions hidden in these bodies of these animals. And this, of course, then retransformed into the typeface. And now the gradient is not coded to shift its shape, but more only its kind of distribution. These are some of the experiments and outputs that, yeah, I created with this new way of working with the font. And that was my presentation. Thank you so much. And I think now we're going to have some questions if you want that.
Thank you so much, Lena, for your presentation. Okay, so first we can see if someone from the audience from YouTube have any questions. Okay. 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 So while we are finding for some answers from YouTube, does anyone from the audience have any questions? Okay, so we have one. Let me.
Oh, hi. So I wrote this down. I'm sorry it's a bit long, but I'm gonna try to summarize it kind of. A key factor in your biography is your interest in philosophical theory in the context of art and technology. What experiences and lessons do you believe spiked your interest in this subject? What philosophical references inside the world of design, arts, technology, etc., do you find the most interesting?
So obviously the field of aesthetics in philosophy was the main thing that I kind of concentrated on. And yeah, I find the texts that mathematicians and philosophers produced in kind of the era when the first computers were available and then also used for visual, for the generation of visuals and for art. These are, I think, the most interesting references and texts to me when when academics ask themselves, how does the relationship between artwork and human and then the computer as kind of a third actor that is introduced here, how does this change? What does systematization and formalization mean for art, mean for design, for visuals in general, and for the philosophy of aesthetics? And this I hope this answers your question. Feel
Yes,
free
thank you so much. Yes.
to follow up if you want. So yeah, this is what inspires me most, and also a time where I often wish I could be part of this enthusiasm.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina, for your question. Does anyone else from the audience have any questions? Okay, well, I'll pass to.
I can't hear you in the case that you're talking right now.
What about now?
Yes, now.
Okay, sorry, the mic just went off. If it happens again, please do let us know. So thank you for your presentation. And my question was, how easy is it to go from experimentation into putting these works into production, right? Into a client, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the more you experiment, the easier it gets, because then you have kind of a collection and an archive of experiments that you can already pull from. And if this needs to go a bit quicker, then you are kind of ready to start and ready to produce, and you have kind of experience with what you can do. I normally take, in either case, like at least a few days of experimentation in the project plan, anyways. And yeah, I think it's important to be as free as possible within these first days. And then, in my experience, is it has paid off to choose this path that gives you the most paths. So the path that gives you the most ideas, that you find most inspiring, that is usually the one that you can sell to clients better, because working with systems or code, a good selling point is also that it can expand and it can change and it can morph, because we reuse the system that is already in place. So I would say, I mean, for some clients, obviously this is true, and for some not. But if they are open to create creatively, and not only focused on kind of the final output, then I would say experimentation, of course, is this thing that needs to be protected at the beginning, but it can also produce results throughout the whole process. So I think everybody who works creatively has had this experience where maybe even something goes wrong, or in code this happens super often. You do something wrong and you create a bug, and if it's visual, then maybe this bug can also be transformed into something interesting later on. Or ideas come all the time, and I think you just need to be open to them, or clients need to be open to them. Everybody has to, otherwise it doesn't work.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you so much, Lena, for your wonderful presentation. I have a question about when you start a project, mainly you are hired because of the graphic design part or the coding part. Do you have projects that you were hired for different things? And also about the type design part. So do you start by creating a font and then you apply to a project, or do you start the project and then, so maybe I can create a font for this one. So what do you think?
Yeah, so the font is straightforward to answer. It's my personal interest. I love doing these as independent projects, and then the goal can be to sell the font so more people can use it. This is not the case for all projects, but for example, the Geo font, that is something I also sell online so other people can use it. I would love to be approached by a client and I say, hey, we need this typeface. It needs to be special in this and that way. Can you create something? So that would be, I think, my dream project. But that, yeah, I think in the experimental or extreme display typeface kind of sphere, maybe this doesn't happen so often, but fingers crossed. And in terms of this graphic designer slash coder topic, I think I'm mostly hired as a graphic designer because that's also the skill that I kind of advertise through my work most. But I would say when there's something related to coding popping up in a project, this is where people then remember me most and say, okay, we have now a project at the intersection. Maybe maybe this can work. So when something coded is the output, then of course the skill of coding is the most important factor where you're asked. In a book project, this might not be the case. In a poster project, this might not be the case. But where it's always the case is in websites. I dabbled in websites for a long time, but I really started to kind of get into custom backend and maybe a bit more of a professional way of approaching websites last year. And with websites, I feel like people are often really looking just for somebody who can code. So this is a project where I maybe asked, oh, I need a website. Oh, I know you can code it, so therefore you'll get the job. And then the design is of course also important, but on bigger website projects there are designers, web designers, and developers and coders, and it's not one person. So yeah, I hope this made sense. But it's basically project individual, but it's a great question because this, yeah, it's really complicated on one hand, and it's really not on the other. But I do feel like that being both is not super common. So it definitely gets me the chance to work on some projects that I maybe wouldn't have been able to work on if I could not code.
Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so does anyone else have any questions? Okay.
I have another one. So I know that a few people work on dynamical visual identities. I do research on them, and so I was interested in knowing what's your view on flexible systems, right, as opposed to logo-based and static ones.
Yeah, of course, that is something that I'm really drawn to and find super interesting. It's, I think, the topic that emerges from kind of the perfect marriage of code and design. So I think where this manifests most for me in projects that I did or I'm working on is kind of the variable font format. So interpolating between one and another state, or in a kind of 4-axis system, 5 states, where something can move in between 2 different states. It lends itself to generation, animation, diversification, being able to advertise maybe different formats within one client. So yeah, of course, that's something I'm really interested in, and that in one form of another, I'm offering clients as well when we work together on something like an identity.
Do you have any suggestions for students? For example, we have a lot of students coming from advanced typography class here. If they are doing the same thing I did when I took the course, they are probably designing a typeface. And so my question is, how hard would it be to go from just exploring with a couple of glyphs into going into a full variable typeface? And is it something that you would suggest them to do in the course of their academic course?
Of course, I would suggest it. I'm not 100% sure that I understood the question correctly, but once you have a few glyphs, you can already try making a variable system out of it. You don't need to have a completely finished typeface. It doesn't have to contain, yeah, not even not 26, but also not 145 characters. And what you do is you create 2 masters. They need to have the exact same amounts of data, so the same amount of anchor points. And if you shift one master around, then I don't know, the math will be able to calculate indefinite steps in between those 2 masters. And you kind of can then design movement with this. And what I like about the system is that on the one hand, it's rigid. Points can only travel on a linear straight line and not on curves. I mean, not normally anyways. But this gives you limitations, which creates freedom to hack the system, but also the chance to really go for yeah, ideas that lend themselves to this topic. I did a lot of workshops about variable typography, and I would definitely recommend it. It's very fun, and you can experiment visually, but can also learn about interpolation and math and fonts in general, which I think is always good, even if the output is then not super usable or not a full typeface. I think that doesn't really matter.
I didn't quite get, is it a specific team that gives the workshops, or you said Servifont, or?
I do the workshop, so I go to universities and teach about this topic. And the variable type is the variable typeface is just a special way of exporting a font, where instead of thin, regular, bold, you only have one variable font that then can be interpolated, and it can range from thin to bold in kind of seamless mathematical interpolation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for your presentation and also for answering our questions. We will sadly have to end this session now because we'll have a break now with some food, right, Carolina? And then after the break, we will have the inauguration downstairs in piso 1. We'll have the community modules in Feed and Play. I would just like to thank another institution. So we have a couple of people in the committee, also the members of the jury that selected the projects that appear in the exhibition. But I would like to in particularly thank Moritz Schwend from the University of Applied Science in Nuremberg, because this year, for the first time, we had sort of a partnership between Processing Community Day at Coimbra and the Nuremberg. And we have some work that came from the students from Nuremberg, which is actually pretty nice. So for everyone here in the room, thank you for coming. Lena, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We will have another session in 1 week, this time not here at the department, but in Centro Cultural Peneda da Saudade. We will also stream it online. So that's the session for Processing Community Day. So it's not Community Day, it's Community Days, 2 days this year. And then we will have 2 more sessions. So on the 18th and 25th, and we will announce them properly. Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we thank Lena once again, and thank you all. Okay.
Thank you. Bye. Have a good break.
Bye.
Thank you once again.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Bye. Bye-bye.